Hello everybody, Mikey here, or Burns Post like I always say, and today I'm going to be talking about FNAF's most mysterious and elusive character, Golden Freddy. Now, I've been wanting to cover Golden Freddy for almost a year now, however I could never come up with a good enough theory about him. It felt like every time I was close to solving a mystery about him, there'd be 1,000 things that would contradict it and I would start all over. However, today I think I have a good enough theory to post. I'm also going to be explaining Golden Freddy's role and history in each game too, so let's get into it. So first up is FNAF 1, and man, this is such an awesome introduction to Golden Freddy. To this day, I love the way you spawn him with the poster, and I love how rare it is too. It really makes Golden Freddy feel like a ghost story within a ghost story. But what does FNAF 1 tell us about Golden Freddy? Well, it tells us that he can at least teleport, as he can still get in with both doors closed. It tells us he's hidden away from the other four, as we can't see him on the cameras. And it also tells us that he may be the angry spirit, with how his jump scare sounds matter and also different from the other four. So now on to FNAF 2. Now there's a lot of Golden Freddy content in this game. The first is that he isn't as hard to find anymore. He appears quite often on night 6 and can also be accessed in the custom night. However, there's one little thing about Golden Freddy in this game that I find many FNAF theories haven't discussed in years, or at least I haven't seen it talked about in years. And that is the poster of Golden Freddy in the office. Now I know it's a little detail and it may not even mean much. I mean, it's just a child's drawing. Oh wait, so I'll talk more about this drawing later down the line when I get into my theory, but I still wanted to mention it here. But what I'm getting at here is that Golden Freddy appears a lot in this game. He appears during normal gameplay, during the dream/cutscenes, and during the death minigames as well. He even has a custom night challenge named after him. So what does FNAF 2 tell us about Golden Freddy? Well, what it tells me is that Golden Freddy is the most ghostly figure in the FNAF games. He's also more separated from the others in this game, as he only appears on night 6 and kinda attacks on his own as opposed to the others, who will attack together, like BB and Foxy or Toy Bonnie taking extra time in the office to distract us from the music box. Now for FNAF 3, and surprisingly, this game doesn't have too much Golden Freddy in it. He only appears in one minigame, and it's the Give Cake to the Child minigame. In that minigame, we walk around as Golden Freddy to give a cake to a sad child. We also see a child wearing Golden Freddy's mask in the Happiest Day minigame. Now these are all the appearances of Golden Freddy as we usually know him. However, we can also see a spirit that may or may not be the missing child in Golden Freddy in the Night 5 minigame. So what does this tell us about Golden Freddy? Well, this continues to show us that Golden Freddy is separated from the MCI kids. The ghosts we see both appear alone, not with the core group at the start. We either bring them together or walk to the others. FNAF 4 is one of the stranger games in FNAF. Even out of the original lineup, this game always stood out of the bunch. But what does this game tell us about Golden Freddy? Well, very little about the ghost we all know and love, as this game supposedly takes place before the MCI and doesn't take place at a Freddy Fazbear's. But what this game could also possibly tell us is that Golden Freddy, aka Fredbear, did the Big Bite, aka the Bite of 83. And this is the first event that got a kid hurt in a Freddy's in the timeline. Keyword being in, more on that later. This game also tells us that Golden Freddy, or the suit at least, has been around for a long time. But besides that, not much else, although shout out to my boy Nightmare Fredbear. Guys, is there anything I really even need to say about Golden Freddy for sister location? The only thing here is just his name being mentioned in the custom night, and there really isn't anything solid. Now on to Pizza Sim.
There's nothing.
Thank you, son.
Alright, so if there's anything that can be the Golden Freddy game in FNAF, it's this one. Golden Freddy is hyped up the whole time in this game as the one you should not have killed, the vengeful spirit, the direct soul torturing Afton in hell. Now, I know over the years there's been some confusion with this game, but it hasn't really changed much. The Frights books aren't meant to overwrite the FNAF game lore, it's just meant to give some more light on it. So in my opinion, UCN is still Afton getting tortured in hell by Golden Freddy, aka Cassidy. Now that statement may be bold, but I got one bolder for you. The name of the spirit possessing Golden Freddy doesn't really matter too much. No matter what timeline they're in, they always do the same thing to Afton, torturing him. Now, I personally prefer Cassidy, but again, that doesn't really matter too much because at the end of the day, they are the vengeful spirit. So, with the history of Golden Freddy out of the way, allow me to tell you what I think is the story of Golden Freddy. I'll give my evidence for this theory after I explain it to you all, just to keep it simple. The story of Golden Freddy starts in 1983, where a young nameless child of William Afton is being bullied by his older brother and being left alone by his father on most days. As for his mother, well, she's gone, leaving a parental hole in his life. Suffice to say, this wasn't the best situation for him. Then, one day when he was at one of his father's restaurants, he sees something he should never have seen: the security puppet from the restaurant over a dead child's body. Afraid, the boy runs to his father to tell him what he saw. His father tells his oldest son, Michael Afton, to take the boy home while he deals with it. The older son agrees, however he does tease and bully his brother for being a crybaby. Later that night, the man comes home only to find that the child went back to that place, the Freddy's where the little girl got murdered. At that moment, two things happened. One, the child feared the animatronics, thinking that the puppet was the one who killed the little girl. And two, his Fredbear plushie starts talking to him. At first it said comforting things, telling him to be brave or to not let his brother get to him. The plushie lifted the child up into its arms in a way. However, this little glimpse of happiness would soon be taken away on the week of his birthday party. He began to have nightmares of the Freddy's animatronics. First it was Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, then Foxy, then towards the end of the week was his favorite, Fredbear. During the day he would tell his father about these nightmares, but his father didn't seem interested, but had a strong stare as the child would tell him, as if he had an idea about those nightmares. However, when the child's birthday would finally come around, he would sadly die to the big bite, a prank by his older brother gone wrong. In the child's final moments, he could hear his brother apologize to him. However, he also could hear his Fredbear plush talk to him, comforting him in his final moments, saying that she will put him back together. When the child would open his eyes again, he was back at Fredbear's, by the Fredbear suit on the stage. The child would try to leave, but he couldn't. He was now forever bound to the Fredbear animatronic, not possessing it, but attached to it. Fredbear's would close a little bit after this, due to spring-lock failures, notably always around the Fredbear animatronic. For the next 2 years, the child would haunt the area around the Fredbear animatronic. Then, one day, his father came into the back room where the suit was being kept. The boy was happy for a moment, but only for a moment. His father put on the spring Bonnie suit and then lured a little girl into the back and killed her. The boy was confused and scared, wondering why his father would do such a thing. His father would do this 3 more times. However, he would switch between the suits, so at least once the boy had to witness the father take a child to the back. The boy would try to talk to the other children's spirits once they woke up in their new suits. However, it was like they couldn't understand him or even speak. They weren't as aware as he was. However, they seemed to dislike the Fredbear suit. They were clearly confused on who actually killed them. The restaurant the boy was in was closed. He and the other souls were moved to the new location, where he first saw the little girl with the security puppet. He was terrified, thinking that the puppet will want to hurt him and the other children. However, that wasn't the case at all. It was a rare surprise and a moment of peace. The Marionette was the little girl and was the voice of his Fredbear plush. For the first time in years, he had some comfort. However, it wouldn't last, as he had to watch as workers, unaware, would take pieces from the animatronics to use for the toy animatronics, mixing the children's souls between animatronics. His father would come to the restaurant for a week at night. The boy was confused as why he was there. That was until his father was just wanting to see his victims suffer. The puppet and the others organized an attack on him, however it failed. The man only said one thing to the puppet and Freddy: "You can't." The next week there was a new guard, however the puppet was stuck in their box with the music box, and the others couldn't tell the difference. However, his father was still there on the day shift. One day his father would don the Fredbear suit once again to do one last killing. For a moment our story changes perspectives, not from the boy anymore, but to a girl named Cassidy. Cassidy was a bit of a mean child. She didn't mean to be, but at such a young age she didn't know how to control her anger. Her parents never paid her much attention. Even at Freddy's it seemed like the animatronics would avoid her, until one day, when a yellow bear animatronic came up to her, told her that he had a party just for her. He said, "Follow me," so she did. She followed the bear back into the back. She saw broken animatronics, but before she could say anything, everything went dark, and she died. When she would awake, she would see her arms, but it wasn't her arms, it was the arms of the yellow bear, the Golden Freddy animatronic. At first she thought she was just in the suit, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get out. Then she heard a sound, a soft whimper and a cry. She looked over to her left and saw a little boy, and finally Golden Freddy was now complete, the son of the man behind the slaughter and the one he shouldn't have killed, together as if fate determined their meeting. The boy explained to the girl what happened and where she she was. She was furious, she was tricked, she thought she could finally trust someone and be noticed. The boy apologized to her for his father's crime. However, she responded to him not with anger, but friendship and their suffering. She tells the boy that he should be more angry at his situation and what happened to him, and he agreed. He had been screwed over by the same people who should have protected him. The puppet, while good intentioned, couldn't help with putting him back together anymore. So for the first time in the week the new guard was there, Golden Freddy decided to join in on the attack. The other spirits of the children were scared and nervous at Cassidy's anger, not avoiding her, but not exactly wanting to work with her to take down the guard. With the power of 2 souls, Golden Freddy was far more powerful than the others. The suit was no longer just a suit, but able to be more ghostly. It was now able to teleport and even create apparitions of themselves. Cassidy thought it'd be funny to make a giant floating head of themselves to scare who she thought was her killer. However, even with the help of Golden Freddy, they were not successful in their attack of the guard, and the toy animatronics are scrapped and the 5 missing kids. Plus, the boy would be moved back to an old location. Unfamiliar to the boy and Cassidy, they were put in a back room out of view of the cameras. However, that didn't really matter to them. They would move and teleport to wherever they wanted. They seemed fond of hiding in the kitchen. One night, before the restaurant opened, the killer had returned. He looked like he couldn't sleep, as if the spirits were keeping him up. He ambushed the animatronics and destroyed their suits. Cassidy and the boy saw this. Cassidy, fed up with the man, wanted to go and get him to attack him. However, the boy pointed out that he would hear their suit. The boy, feeling brave with the support of his new friend, said that he will get him for the both of them. He then walked to the back room, the safe room. He saw the other souls staring at the man, blocking the way out. The man, now able to see the ghosts, now that they weren't stopped by their suits, he was terrified. He ran into the yellow rabbit suit and taunted the ghosts, thinking they still couldn't see him or hurt him. He laughed and laughed, but then a loud crunch filled the room. The old spring locks went off, crushing the man inside. The spirits, thinking they were free, disappeared. It should have been the happy ending that they wanted. However, that wasn't the case. They couldn't move on. They didn't know why. But all 6 souls in the building were angry, and they wanted to take out their anger. When the new restaurant opened, they heard a familiar voice. They didn't know his name, but they knew his voice from the phone. They remembered they helped the guard, who they thought were their killer. They found a new outlet to take their anger out on. It took them almost a year, but they finally got him, and Golden Freddy was the one who took him out. With a loud and angry scream, the phone guy was no more. However, the next week came with a new guard, and for the first time in a long time, the boy saw his brother. He was shocked for a moment, but that surprise turned into anger, and for the first time, the boy's anger outshined Cassidy's. So, the animatronics attacked the guard once again. However, they couldn't get the brother, and they were left there to rot for years. The restaurant closed shortly after, so the boy and Cassidy were stuck, forgotten, until one day the puppet returned. She took the spirits to a party at a place that looked like Freddy's. In fact, it looked like Fredbear's, but dark and different. The puppet was finally able to have a way to put the boy back together, a party just for him, with all his new friends and a cake all for him. What he should have had all those years ago. For the first time since that bite, the boy felt at peace. He could finally move on, and so he did. However, the story would not be the same for his friends. When they would open their eyes again, they wouldn't be at Freddy's, but deep underground where memory slept. They were in Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals. When the Freddy staff used the parts from the animatronics all those years ago for the toy animatronics, it seems like the spirits were still attached to those parts, and apparently after the bite of 87 and Cassidy's death, the toys were reused for new animatronics called the Fun Times. They were all mixed together, no longer in separate suits. However, there was one exception to this, and that was Cassidy. She was still in Golden Freddy, however she missed her friends despite not being that close, and despite them being afraid of her, she missed them. So with her ghostly powers, she left Freddy's and went looking for them and found them at Circus Baby's. However, they looked different, and she wanted to warm up to them a little. So using her ghostly powers, she changed her appearance to look like an Endo from the location. And for a moment in time, Golden Freddy was no longer Fredbear, no longer the yellow bear, but a yellow Endo. Yendo for short. However, all was not well in this new location. The spirits, now in their new fun-time bodies, were being shocked and forced to perform and rented out daily, and whenever they wouldn't work, they would be hurt by the scooper. However, to Cassidy, there was one interesting thing. The boy's sister was there. She was in Circus Baby, and she was surprised at the new spirits here. However, the other spirits took a shine to her. All of them but Cassidy. To be blunt, Cassidy did not like this girl's vibe. In Cassidy's eyes, there was only one good Afton, and he was no longer with her. But she wanted to get closer to the other spirits, so she decided to keep that to herself. However, a few months into their torment, a new technician came, and at first the other spirits, including the sister, thought that their killer had come back, that somehow he survived the spring locks. However, it wasn't. It was the boy's brother, Michael Afton. He had come down to the underground looking for something or for someone. The boy's sister, Elizabeth, came up with a plan to escape, and they were going to use Michael to do it. However, Cassidy wanted nothing to do with this plan. She could tell it was an Afton, wasn't her killer. However, she did merge into Ennard with the rest of them, as she didn't want to be alone, to be left behind. The plan worked and Michael was scooped, and they took over his body and left the underground. However, their success was short-lived as they realized this was an Afton, or at least the Afton they were looking for. His body was also getting weaker and couldn't keep Ennard safe anymore, so they ejected themselves from him. Elizabeth, feeling bad, chose to keep close for a few moments to comfort her brother and help him get up, to guide his spirit back into his body. Elizabeth would force and guide the body into the sewers to keep going, not giving the others much of a choice in anything. Cassidy, fed up with this, took charge and rallied the others to kick Elizabeth out, to make it fair for all of them. The other spirits agreed, especially after how Elizabeth's plan failed to help them move on, so they ejected Elizabeth out of Ennard. However, with Elizabeth gone, the body was weaker. Cassidy, thinking on her feet, suggested going back to the underground to merge her old Endo with the body to give them more support. The others agreed and went back. They merged with the wires of Endo. They also took a broken Funtime Freddy mask to fit their form, as Gabriel, the spirit who possessed Freddy, wanted it. And now they were no longer Ennard, and Cassidy was no longer isolated from the group. For the first time ever, the missing children worked together and became Molten Freddy. They left the underground once again and eventually found a new Freddy's to inhabit. However, when they got there, they were shocked to see Michael there. They went along into his office and sound cues, but made him aware that it was them. During the week, they would try to attack Michael in the vents. However, towards the end, they saw a familiar face. The puppet was now in a gray bear suit. They were happy to see her and help her try to get Michael. They were so angry and bloodthirsty that they couldn't even tell that Afton was there as Scrap Trap. However, at the end of the week, it would all end. A voice would cut off Elizabeth and would tell them that they were finally going to be able to move on. A fire started and they were getting burned, but it didn't hurt. It felt like it was finally over. The missing kids could finally move on and go to heaven. They got to go to a place where they could have anything and everything they wanted. However, Cassidy finally got what she wanted. A place where she could let out her anger on her killer for all eternity. She used the very same things on Afton that Afton used against her and her friends. And with that, the story of Golden Freddy comes to a close. Alright, so I know that was a lot, and honestly, it was a lot more than I first thought it was going to be when I was writing the script. And yes, I might have taken a few creative liberties here and there, but I think I came up with a pretty satisfying story to Golden Freddy. But before I wrap this video up, let's run through the evidence really quick. So the first thing for my evidence is the crying child seeing Charlie's death, or at least her body. I think it makes sense for him because one, he probably went to Freddy's a lot as he had all the plushies, and Michael even had a mask of Foxy. Two, I think it would make sense for him to misinterpret what happened to Charlie as he is just a kid. He probably thought Charlie died to the puppet. I also think it makes sense for him to go back and see it again to face his fears. Now, the next thing I feel like I need to explain is why do I think the Fredbear plush could be Charlie? Well, I think it would make sense for Charlie want to comfort the crying child, as if the Aftons and Emilys were as close as we think they are, it would make sense for Charlie and the crying child to be friends. I also think it's in Charlie's character to want to put him back together after the big bite. Now, why do I think the crying child doesn't possess Golden Freddy, but just lingers around him? Well, you guys might hate me because of this, but it's because of his page in the character encyclopedia. He's depicted as a ghost, not ever what he possessed or just his sprite, but a ghost. So I think it would make more sense for him to just haunt around Golden Freddy than rather being Golden Freddy himself. I think it would clear up any reason why there's only one spirit within Golden Freddy, because there's only one spirit inside and the other is just floating around him. Another thing is, recently Golden Freddy has been depicted with only one eye lit up in him, in the movie and in the character book, so I think that's trying to tell us that only one soul is in Golden Freddy, but that doesn't mean another soul can't linger around him. Now, the next thing I think I need to prove is why Afton used Golden Freddy more than Spring Bonnie, and why Cassidy was killed in the FNAF 2 location. Well, it's because of this drawing. It shows 4 kids not liking Golden Freddy. Well, at first this could be nothing, but why only 4 and not 5? Why would the kids seem upset to see Golden Freddy? Well, I think it's because it's the children's souls who drew this picture. They were either tricked to think it was was Golden Freddy or are just confused, or they could just be more scared of him. But the main takeaway of this is that Golden Freddy is different from the rest. Now the next thing I need to explain is why do I think the crying child disappears after the Happiest Day minigame? Well, due to its similar structure to the Fredbear's restaurant in FNAF 4. It's the same exact layout as that one, and the children are wearing the same masks that the bullies were wearing in FNAF 4, so I think it would make sense and it would come full circle that the crying child would have his own mask too now. Also, the crying child doesn't really come up in Sister Location or Pizza Sim, so I think it would make sense for me to say that he's long gone by then. Another thing I want to talk about is when I said the toys were used to make the fun times, I think it would make sense for Afton to reuse the toys to make the fun times. After all, he was smart and resourceful. He was probably interested in why they were walking around at night. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about today is Yendo being Golden Freddy. The evidence for this is that he has the same abilities as Golden Freddy, he's wearing just like Golden Freddy, and it would explain how Molten Freddy is so different from Ennard. It's because they took Yendo's wires and that's why they're more wiry and spaghetti. So I think that's all I have to say on my theory, but one thing I want to get across is even if I'm not right, I think that's cool. I like the idea of Golden Freddy being an undying mystery in FNAF. Golden Freddy is my second favorite FNAF character, so I hope this video did him justice. But what do you all think about this video in theory? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you like this video. Stay safe out there, and may the stars shine down upon you. Bye!